Saturday morning in our split-level house outside Portland, Maine, started like any other weekend. The October air carried that crisp bite that makes you want to stay inside with coffee and forget the world exists. I was doing exactly that, sprawled on our worn leather couch, watching some mindless sports highlights on ESPN while Danielle belted out Taylor Swift songs from the shower upstairs. My name's Elliot Carson, but everyone calls me Eli. I'm 34, work maintenance for the city of Portland, and I've got the kind of life that looks boring from the outside, but suits me just fine. Or at least it did until 10 minutes ago. Danielle's phone lit up on the coffee table where she'd left it, buzzing with a text notification. Normally, I wouldn't even glance at it. Privacy and all that. But the preview showed enough to make my blood freeze. I really miss your body. The sender was listed as David W. David Lurie from her office. I knew him from the company Christmas parties, smooth-talking sales manager with perfect teeth and a red BMW who always stood too close to my wife when he talked to her. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone. I knew her passcode, our anniversary date. She'd never hidden it from me, which now seemed like either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity. The message thread made me want to throw up. David, 9:23 a.m. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. David, 9:31 a.m. When can we meet again? My place or yours? David, 9:45 a.m. I really miss your body. Last night when she'd told me she was working late on quarterly reports. Last night when she'd come home at 11:30, hair slightly messed up, claiming she'd grabbed dinner with her friend Kristen after the office. I scrolled up. The affair had been going on for months. Months of late meetings and girls' nights and team-building exercises, all lies. All cover for her screwing David Lurie in his fancy downtown apartment while I sat home like an idiot, missing her, sometimes making dinner that went cold, waiting for her to come home. Danielle was still singing in the shower, completely oblivious that her world was about to implode. My finger hovered over the keyboard. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to confront her directly, to be the bigger person, to handle this like an adult. But there was another part of me, a part that had been pushed around and overlooked and taken for granted for too long, that had a different idea. I typed back as her. Come over. My husband isn't home today. Shint. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it over the shower, and Danielle's off-key singing. David's response came back in 30 seconds. Seriously, right now, I replied. Yes, hurry. Then I sent our address. Be there in 20 minutes, baby. Can't wait to see you, baby. He called my wife baby. I screenshot everything, sending copies to my own phone, then deleted the sent folder so Danielle wouldn't see what I'd written. I put her phone back exactly where she'd left it and sat back on the couch, hands folded, waiting. The shower was still running. Danielle had moved on to some Adele song, really belting it out. She always sang when she was happy. I wondered if she was thinking about David while she soaped herself up, planning their next rendezvous, laughing about how clueless her husband was. 18 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Eli, can you get that? Danielle called from the bathroom. I didn't move. I just sat there, phone in hand, waiting. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. Eli. Danielle's voice was irritated now. Someone's at the door. I could hear her turning off the shower, muttering under her breath. Footsteps across the bathroom floor, the sound of her grabbing a towel. Who is it? She called as she hurried down the stairs, clutching a white bath towel around herself, hair dripping wet. Why don't you check? I said quietly from the couch. She shot me a confused look, but walked to the front door and opened it. David Lurie stood on our doorstep, holding a bouquet of red roses, dressed in his weekend uniform of perfectly pressed khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than I made in a week. His confident smile faltered when he saw Danielle in nothing but a towel, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in the space of 3 seconds. What are you doing here? Her voice was barely a whisper. You texted me to come over, David said, holding up his phone, showing her their message thread. You said your husband wasn't home. Danielle's face went completely white. She turned slowly to look at me sitting on the couch, her phone in my hand, screenshots of their entire affair displayed on the screen. Surprise, honey, I said calmly. David was backing away from the door, finally understanding that he'd walked into something very different from what he'd expected. I should go, he stammered. But Danielle grabbed his arm. Wait, David, This isn't what it looks like. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Really? Because the texts are pretty clear. I started reading them aloud. I miss your body. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. I looked up at both of them. Should I continue? There are months of these. David was trying to pull away from Danielle, but she was gripping his arm like a lifeline, her towel slipping dangerously low. I held up my phone and started recording. Let go of me, Danielle, David hissed. This is insane. How could you invite him here? Danielle spun on me, her voice shrill with panic. I didn't invite him, I replied evenly. You did, according to him, I gestured to David, who was still holding his phone with their message thread clearly visible. That's when it hit her. She realized she was trapped. She couldn't deny the affair with David standing on our doorstep holding flowers meant for her. She couldn't claim the texts were fake when they were on both their phones. Please, she whispered. Eli, please, we can work this out. No, but I was done listening. I was done being the understanding husband, the guy who worked double shifts to pay for her gym membership and her girls' nights out and her new car while she was screwing her coworker in his fancy apartment. David finally broke free and ran for his car. Danielle chased after him in her towel, not caring that Mrs. Geller from next door was walking her dog and getting an eyeful, not caring that the college kids across the street were on their porch with their phones out, filming everything. David, wait, she called, but he was already peeling out of our driveway like his ass was on fire. She stood there in the driveway for a moment, half naked, dripping wet, while the neighbors stared. Then she seemed to remember where she was and ran back inside, slamming the door behind her. Turn that off, she demanded, seeing me still recording. No, I said. Evidence for the lawyer. Lawyer? Her voice cracked. Eli, please. We don't need lawyers. We can fix this. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. How long? I asked. She was crying now, mascara that had survived the shower now streaming down her cheeks. How long what? How long have you been screwing him? She flinched like I'd slapped her. It's not. We didn't. How long, Danielle? 6 months, she whispered. Since the Christmas party. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of her coming home to me smelling like another man's cologne, kissing me with the same mouth that had been on him hours earlier. In our bed? I asked. She couldn't look at me. That was answer enough. I picked up her phone again and scrolled through her contacts until I found what I was looking for. David's wife, Monica. I'd met her at company events, nice woman. Worked as a nurse, had 2 young kids. What are you doing? Danielle lunged for the phone, but I held it away from her. I called Monica and put it on speaker. Hello? Monica's voice was cheerful, probably expecting a call from her friend Danielle. Hi, Monica. This is Eli Carson, Danielle's husband. I think there's something you need to know about your husband and my wife. Eli? She sounded confused. What's wrong? I sent her the screenshots while we talked. Check your phone. I just sent you some pictures. There was silence for a long moment. Then I heard Monica's sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, that bastard. That lying, cheating bastard. Danielle was on her knees now, literally begging. Please, Eli, please don't do this. Think about Monica's kids. Think about what this will do to them. I am thinking about them, I said. They deserve to know what kind of man their father is. Monica was crying now, but her voice was steel. Thank you for telling me, Eli. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to both of us. After I hung up, I looked at Danielle, still on the floor in her towel, and felt nothing but disgust. Pack your things, I said. What? Pack your things and get out. You've got 1 hour. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Ask David for a place to stay. Oh wait, his wife probably changed the locks by now. As if on cue, David's phone started ringing. We could hear it from outside where he'd dropped it in his panic to get away. It rang and rang and rang. Danielle's best friend Kristen showed up 40 minutes later, just as Danielle was stuffing clothes into garbage bags. I'd already changed the locks, called my buddy Luke, who runs a locksmith business on the side. I'd also called the bank and frozen our joint accounts, canceled her credit cards, and transferred the car loan into my name only. Kristen burst through the door like she owned the place, all 5'2" of her, bleached blonde hair and fake nails, ready for battle. Eli Carson, what the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. Protecting my assets, I said calmly. Did Danielle tell you why she's packing? Kristen's eyes narrowed. She said you had some kind of breakdown, that you're being paranoid and jealous. I held up my phone with the screenshots. Paranoid about what exactly? Kristen's face went pale as she read. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd probably been covering for Danielle this whole time, providing alibis, helping her lie to me. You helped her, didn't you? I asked. All those girls' nights that were really dates with David. All those work emergencies that were really hotel visits. You knew. Kristen looked at Danielle, who was frantically shaking her head. Don't say anything, Chris, Danielle warned. But I already had my answer. The guilt was written all over Kristen's face. Get out, I said. Both of you, now. This is my house too, Danielle protested. I have rights. Actually, you don't. The house is in my name only. Wedding gift from my parents, remember? You signed a prenup, and now you've violated the fidelity clause, so you get nothing. That was a lie. We didn't have a prenup, but Danielle had been so panicked and guilty that she didn't even question it. They left an hour later, Danielle's entire life reduced to 4 garbage bags and a suitcase. I watched from the window as they loaded everything into Kristen's car. Danielle crying, Kristen shooting murderous looks back at the house. As soon as they were gone, I called Luke. Dude, you sound like hell, he said when he answered. Can you meet me at the Brass Lantern tonight? I need a drink and someone to talk to. Everything okay with you and Danielle? Not anymore. The Brass Lantern was exactly the kind of dive bar you'd expect to find in a working-class neighborhood outside Portland. Sticky floors, neon beer signs, and a clientele that minded their own business unless you gave them a reason not to. Luke was already there when I arrived, nursing a bud and chatting with the bartender. Luke Brennan had been my best friend since high school. He was built like a linebacker, which served him well in his job as a bouncer at some of the rougher clubs downtown. He also had a side business doing locksmith work and general handyman stuff. Most importantly, he was loyal as a dog and twice as protective. So, he said as I sat down and ordered a whiskey, want to tell me why you needed new locks installed on a Saturday? I told him everything. The texts, the trap, David showing up with flowers, Danielle in the towel, the neighbors filming, Monica finding out about her cheating husband, all of it. Luke listened without interrupting, his face getting darker with each detail. That cheating bitch, he said when I finished. And this David guy, he just showed up at your house? With flowers? Like he owned the place. Where's Danielle now? Staying with Kristen, I think. Or maybe she found a motel. Not my problem anymore. Luke was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he grinned, and I recognized that look. It was the same expression he'd had in high school when he was planning to get back at the bullies who'd been picking on the younger kids. You know, he said slowly, David's car was in the parking lot at Flanagan's last night. Red BMW, right? License plate says Sales 1? I nodded. Funny thing about fancy cars. They're real sensitive to certain kinds of damage. Keying, for instance. Or having stink bombs put in the air conditioning. Or having certain words written on the windows in soap. Luke, I'm just saying, hypothetically, if someone wanted to send a message about respecting other people's marriages, there are ways to do that. I should have said no. I should have told him to leave it alone, that I was going to handle this through lawyers and divorce courts like a civilized adult. Instead, I finished my whiskey and said, hypothetically, when would this message sending occur? Well, hypothetically, David usually shows up at Flanagan's around 9 on Saturday nights. And hypothetically, he usually stays until last call, which gives someone plenty of time to deliver a message to his car. It was 8:30. Flanagan's was a step up from the Brass Lantern, the kind of place where young professionals went to feel edgy without actually being in danger. David's red BMW was parked right where Luke said it would be, gleaming under the parking lot lights like a beacon of douchebag entitlement. You sure about this? Luke asked as we sat in his pickup truck, watching the restaurant. He came to my house, I said. He brought flowers for my wife. He thought he could just waltz in and continue screwing her in my bed. Fair point. We waited until we saw David through the window, settled at the bar with what looked like his second or third drink, chatting up a brunette who was clearly not his wife. Classy, Luke muttered. We moved fast. Luke had come prepared with everything we needed. Keys for scratching paint, industrial-strength stink bombs designed for clearing out pest animals, and window markers that would take serious effort to remove. I keyed cheater into the driver's side door while Luke worked on the passenger side with homewrecker. Then we popped the hood and dropped 2 stink bombs into the air conditioning intake. The smell would take weeks to fade, if it ever did. For the finishing touch, Luke wrote, "I screw married women," across the rear windshield in bright red window marker. Think he'll get the message? Luke asked as we walked back to his truck. If he doesn't, we'll send a clearer one. We were back at the Brass Lantern by 10:30, establishing our alibi with the bartender and half a dozen regulars who'd known us for years. At 11:15, my phone rang. It was David. "You son of a bitch," he snarled when I answered. "I know it was you. I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked innocently. Luke was grinning beside me. "You know damn well who this is. You vandalized my car." "David? David Lurie? Why would I vandalize your car? I barely know you." "Because of Danielle." "What about Danielle? Is something wrong with my wife?" There was silence on the other end. David was realizing that he'd just admitted to having some kind of relationship with my wife to whoever might be listening. "I'm going to call the police," he said finally. "You should definitely do that," I agreed. "Tell them all about why you think I'd want to vandalize your car. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the details." He hung up. "Think he'll actually call the cops?" Luke asked. "Would you?" "Hello, officer. Someone vandalized my car, probably because I'm having an affair with his wife?" "I don't think so, but David surprised me." 20 minutes later, a Portland PD cruiser pulled up outside the Brass Lantern. The officer who walked in was someone I recognized. Tom Morrison, a guy I'd gone to high school with. "Eli Carson?" he called out. "That's me." Tom walked over, looking uncomfortable. "I need to ask you a few questions about some vandalism tonight." "Sure thing. What happened?" "Someone damaged a BMW belonging to a David Lurie. He seems to think you might be involved." "David Lurie," I repeated thoughtfully. "That name sounds familiar." "Oh, right. He works with my wife." "Why would he think I'd vandalize his car?" Tom looked even more uncomfortable. "He says you have some kind of personal dispute." "Personal dispute? I've maybe talked to the guy 3 times in my life, all at company parties. What kind of personal dispute could we have?" He wasn't very clear on the details. Luke spoke up. "Officer Morrison, Eli's been here with me since about 8 o'clock. Ask Jimmy behind the bar. Ask any of these guys. We've been drinking and playing pool all night." Tom looked around. Half the bar was nodding in agreement. These were guys who'd known me for years, guys who worked honest jobs and didn't appreciate smooth-talking sales managers who drove fancy cars and messed around with other men's wives. "Can anyone verify your whereabouts between 9 and 10:30? Tom asked. "I can," said Jimmy the bartender. "They've been right here. Eli's had 3 whiskeys, and Luke's had 4 beers. They played pool with Mickey and Dave over there around 9:15. Tom sighed and closed his notebook. "Well, unless Mr. Lurie has some actual evidence, he doesn't," I said, "because I didn't do anything." "But Tom, if I were you, I'd ask Mr. Lurie why he thinks someone would want to vandalize his car. Might be an interesting conversation." After Tom left, the bar erupted in laughter and backslapping. Word had already gotten around about Danielle's affair. Mrs. Geller had been busy on the phone all afternoon, and the general consensus was that David had gotten what he deserved. "So what's next?" Luke asked as we settled back at the bar. "Now we wait," I said, "and we watch everything fall apart." Sunday morning brought the first real consequences. Danielle called me at 7 a.m., sobbing. "Eli, please, you have to help me." "Help you with what?" "David won't answer my calls. Kristen kicked me out. I'm sleeping in my car." "Sounds like a personal problem." "Please, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work it out. Why won't David answer your calls?" She was quiet for a moment. "His wife? She took the kids and left. She's filing for divorce. His car got vandalized last night, and he thinks you did it." "Why would I vandalize his car?" "Eli, please don't play games. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But this has gone far enough." "Has it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it's just getting started." I hung up and made coffee. Then I called my lawyer. By Monday morning, the divorce papers were filed. By Tuesday, the whole story had spread through Danielle's office like wildfire. By Wednesday, her boss Tommy called her in for a meeting about workplace conduct and company policy regarding inter-office relationships. She was fired on Thursday. I know all this because Kristen called me, furious. "You destroyed her life," she accused. "Danielle lost her job, her marriage, her home. She's got nothing left." "She destroyed her own life," I replied. "I just made sure everyone knew about it. She made one mistake." 6 months isn't a mistake, Kristen. 6 months is a choice, and choices have consequences. You're a vindictive bastard, and you're an accessory to adultery. Birds of a feather. But Kristen wasn't done. She'd been busy too, apparently. She'd been calling around to our mutual friends, telling them her version of the story. According to Kristen, I was an abusive, controlling husband who'd had a psychotic break when I discovered Danielle's friendship with David. She was painting Danielle as the victim and me as the villain. It might have worked, except for one thing. Mrs. Geller had gotten the whole thing on video. The footage of David showing up with flowers, Danielle answering the door in a towel, and then chasing after him half naked through the neighborhood had already made the rounds on social media. It was hard to spin that as an innocent friendship. And still, some people believed Kristen's version. Mostly Danielle's friends, women who'd never liked me much anyway. They started a whisper campaign, spreading rumors that I was stalking Danielle, that I'd threatened David, that I was dangerous. It came to a head on Friday night at Murphy's Pub, a place where a lot of people from Danielle's office hung out after work. I'd gone there with Luke and a couple other guys to watch the game, not looking for trouble. But trouble found me anyway. "There's the psycho," someone said loudly as we walked in. I turned to see three women from Danielle's office sitting at a corner table. Kristen, a woman named Beth, who'd been Danielle's cubicle neighbor, and Sarah from accounting. They'd clearly been drinking for a while. "Excuse me," I said. "You heard her," Beth slurred. "Everyone knows what you did to poor Danielle, throwing her out with nothing, getting her fired, harassing David. Harassing David, is that what he told you?" "He told us you threatened him," Sarah chimed in, "that you're stalking both of them." Luke stepped up beside me. "Ladies, maybe you should mind your own business." It is our business," Kristen snapped. "Danielle is our friend, and we're not going to let some abusive asshole destroy her life." The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen. I could feel the weight of their attention, the judgment, the assumptions. This was my moment. I could walk away, be the bigger person, let them think whatever they wanted. Or I could set the record straight once and for all. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots of Danielle and David's text messages. "You want to know what really happened?" I said loudly enough for the whole bar to hear. "Your friend Danielle has been screwing David Lurie for 6 months, in my bed, while I was working overtime to pay for her gym membership and her car payment and her girls' nights out." I started reading the texts out loud. The explicit ones, the ones where they talked about what they wanted to do to each other, the ones where they laughed about how clueless I was. The three women's faces went white. "She lied to me for half a year," I continued. "She lied to you too, apparently. She told you I was abusive, that I was controlling. Here's the truth. I caught her cheating. I filed for divorce, and now she's facing the consequences of her choices." I looked around the bar. Anyone here think I should have just kept quiet? Anyone think I should have let her keep screwing around behind my back? The silence stretched out. Then someone in the back called out, "Hell no." "Damn right," another voice agreed. Kristen stood up, swaying slightly. "You're twisting everything. Danielle made one mistake." 6 months, I cut her off. 6 months of lying, 6 months of cheating, 6 months of making me look like a fool. That's not one mistake, that's a pattern. She loved you. She had a funny way of showing it. Beth tried to defend her friend. "People make mistakes when they're unhappy in their marriage. Then they get divorced," I said. "They don't sneak around like cowards. They don't bring their lovers into the marital bed. They don't lie to everyone they claim to care about." The three women left shortly after that, but not before Kristen promised that this wasn't over. I believed her. Danielle and her supporters weren't going to give up easily, but neither was I. The showdown came 2 weeks later at the Fall Festival in Riverside Park. It was one of those community events that everyone attended. Families with kids, teenagers on dates, older couples walking hand in hand. The whole town would be there, which was exactly what I was counting on. Danielle had been staying at a motel on the outskirts of town, paying by the week with what little money she had left. David had moved back in with his parents after Monica cleaned out their bank accounts and filed for divorce. Both of them were pariahs now, but they were still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. They'd been telling anyone who would listen that I was the real villain in this story, that I'd trapped them, manipulated them, destroyed their lives out of spite. Some people were starting to believe it, especially those who didn't know me well. I couldn't let that stand. Luke and I arrived at the festival around 7, just as the sun was setting and the crowd was at its thickest. We bought some beers and wandered around, talking to people, being seen. Normal guys having a normal evening. Danielle and David showed up around 8. walking together but not touching, trying to look like friends instead of lovers. They'd clearly coordinated this appearance, probably hoping to present a united front, to show people that they were the victims of my vindictive campaign. I watched them work the crowd, talking to mutual acquaintances, playing the sympathy card. Danielle was particularly effective. She'd always been good at making people feel sorry for her. They were standing near the bandstand, talking to Tom and Janet Morrison, the cop from the other night and his wife, when I made my move. "Danielle," I called out as I approached. "David, having a good time?" They both tensed up, but couldn't run without making a scene. "Eli," Danielle said carefully, "I didn't expect to see you here. It's a community event. I'm part of the community." I smiled at Tom and Janet. "How are you folks doing?" "Good, Eli," Tom replied, clearly uncomfortable. "We were just hearing about what a terrible husband I was," I suggested. "How I drove poor Danielle into another man's arms." "Eli, please," Danielle whispered. "Don't do this here." "Do what? Tell the truth?" I looked around at the growing crowd of onlookers. "These people deserve to know what really happened, don't you think?" David stepped forward. "Look, Carson, we don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed. "You came to my house with flowers for my wife. You screwed her in my bed for 6 months, and you're worried about trouble?" The crowd was getting bigger now, people drawn by the rising tension. I saw Mrs. Geller pushing through the crowd with her phone out, recording everything. "You want to know what kind of man David Lurie is?" I asked the crowd. "He seduces married women. He lies to his own wife. He abandons his responsibilities the moment things get difficult." "That's not true," David protested. "Really? Where's your wedding ring, David? Where are your kids tonight?" "Oh, right. They're with your ex-wife because you chose my wife over your own family." David's face was red with anger and embarrassment. "You set us up. You manipulated the whole situation." "I set you up?" I pulled out my phone and showed the crowd the original text from David. "I really miss your body. That was you texting my wife, wasn't it? I didn't make you do that." Danielle was crying now, but I wasn't done. "And you," I turned to her, "you want to tell these people how abusive I was? How controlling? Here's what I controlled. I controlled the bills while you spent money on hotels with your boyfriend. I controlled the household while you lied about where you were every night. I controlled my temper while you made a fool of me in front of the entire town." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I told you I was sorry. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "Every text you sent him was a choice. Every lie you told me was a choice. Every time you brought him into our bed was a choice. And now you're living with the consequences of those choices." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I could see the judgment in their faces, but it wasn't directed at me anymore. "You want to paint me as the villain?" I continued. "Fine. I'm the villain who caught his cheating wife. I'm the villain who refused to be lied to anymore. I'm the villain who made sure everyone knew the truth about what you two really are." I looked around at the crowd, then back at Danielle and David. "Enjoy the festival," I said. "Enjoy being the entertainment." As I walked away, I heard Danielle calling after me, but I didn't turn around. Luke fell into step beside me, grinning. "That was brutal, man," he said. "It was necessary." Behind us, the crowd was already buzzing with conversation, phones coming out to capture photos and videos. By tomorrow, everyone in town would know exactly what had happened, and there would be no more room for Danielle and David's version of events. We were almost to the parking lot when David caught up with us. "Carson! Carson, wait!" I turned around. David was alone, having apparently left Danielle to face the crowd by herself. "What do you want, David?" "This has to stop," he said, breathing hard. "You've destroyed both our lives. Isn't that enough? Have I destroyed your lives? Or have you destroyed your own lives? You manipulated us. You set a trap. I sent one text message using your own words. Everything else was your choice." David stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. "You son of a bitch. You think you're so smart, don't you?" Luke moved to intercede, but I held up a hand. "I think I'm a man who got tired of being lied to," I said calmly. "I think I'm a man who decided to stop being a victim." "You ruined everything." "No, David. You ruined everything the moment you decided to pursue a married woman. You ruined everything when you came to my house thinking you could just take what you wanted. You ruined everything by being exactly the kind of man you are." He swung at me then, a wild haymaker that I saw coming from a mile away. I'd done some boxing in my younger days, and David clearly hadn't. I ducked the punch easily and came up with an uppercut that caught him right in the solar plexus. He went down hard, gasping for air, curled up on the asphalt. Stay down, I advised him, and stay away from me. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my life. I looked around and realized that half the festival crowd had followed us to the parking lot. Mrs. Geller was still recording, capturing David's humiliation for posterity. Show's over, folks, I announced. Just a cheater learning some consequences. As Luke and I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. It was finally over. Danielle and David had been exposed for what they really were. Their lies had been shattered, and their attempts to paint me as the villain had backfired spectacularly. They would leave town eventually. They'd have to. The shame and humiliation would drive them away, probably separately, to start over somewhere else where nobody knew their story. And I would rebuild my life here, in the community that had seen the truth and supported me when it mattered. Justice, it turned out, didn't always come from courtrooms and lawyers. Sometimes it came from simply refusing to be a victim, from standing up and telling the truth no matter how ugly it was. Sometimes it came from setting a trap and watching the guilty parties destroy themselves. 3 months later, I was sitting in the Brass Lantern with Luke, celebrating the finalization of my divorce, when Mrs. Geller came in with the latest gossip. "Did you hear?" she asked breathlessly. "Danielle and that David fellow both left town, separately. Word is she moved back in with her mother in Ohio, and he took some job in Florida." "Good riddance," Luke said, raising his beer. I raised mine as well. "To new beginnings. To getting what you deserve," Mrs. Geller added with a wicked grin. Outside, snow was starting to fall, the first of the season. Inside the warm bar, surrounded by people who knew the truth and had stood by me when it mattered, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like I was home.